In the heart of Wisconsin, behind the quiet facade of a small-town home, a chilling truth unfolded. This is the tragic true story of Jesse Blodgett. But here's your clue for tonight. Who was the first person to raise suspicion in Jesse's case, but was later cleared? Stay with us. In July of 2013, 19-year-old Jessie Blodgett was found dead in her bedroom in Hartford, Wisconsin. What began as a normal summer day soon spiraled into a homicide investigation, drawing national attention. A close-knit community would never be the same. On the morning of Monday, July 15th, 2013, Jessie's mother, Joy Blodgett, quietly placed folded laundry in her daughter's room. Jessie appeared to be peacefully asleep, so Joy left without disturbing her. But by midday, that peaceful image shattered. When Joy returned home for lunch, Jessie had not come downstairs for her scheduled music lesson. Calling out brought no response. Ascending the stairs, Joy opened Jessie's door. What she found was every parent's nightmare. Jessie lay motionless in her bed. Her skin, according to reports, tinged blue. Joy dialed 911, her voice trembling as she described marks around Jessie's neck. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Jessie was declared deceased at the scene. Police noted signs consistent with ligature strangulation, as well as binding marks on her wrists and ankles. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of robbery. Authorities quickly concluded this was no accident. The quiet home had become a crime scene, and Hartford's search for answers had just begun. Jessie Blodgett was more than just a name in a headline. Born in 1994 in Atlanta, Georgia, she was the only child of Buck and Joy Blodgett, a child they once believed they could never have. From a young age, Jessie displayed extraordinary talent, a gifted musician who mastered piano, violin, and voice. But her passions extended far beyond music. Jessie was a fierce advocate for animal rights, environmental sustainability, and social justice causes, particularly focused on ending violence against women. Described by peers and teachers as wise beyond her years, Jessie graduated high school in 2012 and pursued a degree in musical education at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Her dream was simple, yet powerful, to inspire young minds as a choir director. That summer of 2013, Jessie returned home to Hartford. Far from taking a break, she launched her own music teaching business, while starring in a local production of Fiddler on the Roof. But behind her busy schedule, a brief comment to her mother hinted at discomfort. Jessie mentioned feeling uneasy after interactions with two older cast members. Hours later, she would be gone. Her life, filled with promise and purpose, cut short in the very home where she had grown up. In the immediate aftermath, investigators explored every possible lead. With no forced entry and no theft, law enforcement theorized that Jessie likely knew her attacker. Attention first turned to those recently in her orbit. According to reports, Jessie had experienced inappropriate behavior from a co-worker at a local restaurant. This individual was questioned, but quickly cleared due to a solid alibi. Next, focus shifted to the two older men from the theater cast. One was eliminated early, but the second, Randy Talley, raised concern. Randy had no alibi for the morning of July 15th, claiming he was alone at home. However, lacking physical evidence, authorities could not proceed. Then, an unexpected development emerged. 3 days before Jesse's death, a young woman named Melissa Richards survived a violent attack in a nearby park. Melissa's detailed description of her assailant and his vehicle led police to a familiar name: Daniel Bartelt, 19 years old, a close friend of Jesse Blodgett, and someone who had spent that summer making music alongside her. Daniel was brought in for questioning regarding Melissa's case. When inconsistencies in his story surfaced, Daniel allegedly admitted to attacking Melissa. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation. Could a trusted friend be responsible for something far worse? Law enforcement began connecting the dots, and soon, Daniel Bartelt became the primary suspect in Jesse Blodgett's murder. On the morning of Monday, July 15th, 2013, the Blodgett household appeared undisturbed, but inside, a horrific crime had unfolded. According to investigative reports, Daniel Bartelt allegedly arrived at Jesse Blodgett's home shortly after her parents had left for work. There was no sign of forced entry, suggesting Jesse had willingly let him in, or that he knew how to access the house. What happened next would later be pieced together through forensic evidence and recovered materials. Daniel, it is alleged, brought with him a pre-assembled kit containing duct tape, zip ties, cords, and alcohol wipes. Authorities believe Jesse was either asleep or had just woken up when Daniel entered her room. A homemade gag was forced into her mouth, secured tightly with industrial-strength tape. Her wrists and ankles were bound, and she was hogtied, rendering her completely helpless. Tragically, reports indicate that Jesse was then assaulted before being strangled with a ligature. The marks on her neck, wrists, and ankles told a silent story of control and cruelty. Once Jesse was deceased, Daniel allegedly attempted to clean parts of the scene with alcohol wipes. He repositioned Jesse's body beneath her bed covers, creating the illusion that she was merely sleeping. Before leaving, he gathered most of his materials, but investigators would later discover a roll of distinctive tape hidden beneath the bed. After exiting the home, Daniel reportedly drove to Woodlawn Park, where he disposed of the remaining items in a public trash bin. By the time Joy Blodgett returned home that afternoon, the house was silent. Jesse's room, at first glance, appeared undisturbed, but beneath the surface lay evidence of a calculated and premeditated act. The methodical nature of the crime suggested planning. The lack of forced entry, the specific tools, and the effort to conceal the aftermath all pointed toward someone familiar, someone Jesse trusted. This was not a random act of violence. It was a betrayal, carried out in the space where Jesse should have been safest. As investigators processed the scene, each discovery led them closer to identifying the person responsible. And with every piece of tape, every mark, and every unanswered question, the focus narrowed. All signs, allegedly, pointed to Daniel Bartelt. From the outset, investigators faced a daunting task. With no forced entry and minimal physical evidence, the search for Jesse Blodgett's killer demanded precision. Detective Richard Thickens of the Hartford Police Department led the case, operating under the theory that the perpetrator was someone Jesse knew. Interviews were conducted swiftly, from co-workers to cast members. But it was a separate case that provided the critical lead. When Melissa Richards survived an attempted abduction just days earlier, her detailed account became invaluable. A composite sketch and the description of a blue minivan led authorities to Daniel Bartelt. Upon questioning, inconsistencies in Bartelt's story emerged, and when he allegedly confessed to attacking Melissa, detectives shifted focus. Search warrants were executed, uncovering evidence linking Bartelt to Jesse's murder. The investigation had broken open, but challenges remained. While key evidence was recovered, forensic analysis was far from straightforward. The distinctive roll of tape found under Jesse's bed matched tape found in Bartelt's possession. However, DNA evidence was limited. According to reports, efforts to retrieve viable samples were hindered by Bartelt's alleged attempt to clean the scene with alcohol wipes. There were no fingerprints on the ligatures, and no eyewitnesses placing Bartelt at the Blodgett residence that morning. Investigators relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, including Bartelt's internet search history, which revealed disturbing content related to violent crimes. Further linking him to the crime was surveillance footage and mobile phone data, placing him near Woodlawn Park, where discarded materials were recovered. Despite forensic hurdles, the combined weight of physical findings, and Bartelt's own admissions in Melissa's case, built a compelling case for prosecution. The town of Hartford, Wisconsin was gripped by fear. News of Jesse Blodgett's death spread quickly, unsettling a community unaccustomed to violent crime. Residents began locking their doors, avoiding evening walks, and questioning who could be trusted. When it emerged that a close friend of Jesse's, Daniel Bartelt, had been arrested, shock turned to disbelief. This was someone seen at vigils, mourning alongside the Blodgett family. According to community members, trust was shattered. The tragedy prompted local discussions on safety, mental health, and the hidden dangers that can exist behind familiar faces. The case drew widespread media attention, both for its brutal nature and the unexpected identity of the accused. Headlines focused on the betrayal, as outlets reported that Bartelt had attended Jesse's memorial, allegedly knowing he was responsible. National networks picked up the story, framing it as a chilling example of danger lurking close to home. Speculation swirled, with commentators dissecting Bartelt's background, motives, and psychological state. Law enforcement faced mounting pressure as media narratives fueled public demand for swift justice. Amid the coverage, Jesse's family urged focus on her legacy rather than the notoriety of her killer. In the early days of the investigation, several theories emerged. With no sign of forced entry, law enforcement believed Jesse's killer was someone she trusted. Initial suspicion fell on a co-worker who had reportedly harassed Jesse, and two older cast members from her theater group. However, each was cleared through alibis and lack of evidence. For a brief period, investigators considered whether the crime was linked to transient workers, such as nearby tree trimmers. Yet, no credible connection could be established. It wasn't until Daniel Bartelt's alleged confession in the Melissa Richards case that the investigation solidified. Public speculation lingered, with some questioning how a well-regarded young man could allegedly commit such acts. But for law enforcement, the focus was no longer on theories. It was on building a case that would stand in court. Daniel Bartelt's trial commenced in 2014. Prosecutors presented a case built on circumstantial evidence, forensic findings, and Bartelt's own admissions regarding the prior attack. The defense maintained Bartelt's innocence, highlighting the absence of direct DNA evidence linking him to Jesse's murder. Throughout the proceedings, Bartelt reportedly showed little emotion. The jury deliberated carefully, weighing the digital evidence, the recovered materials, and Bartelt's behavior in the days following Jesse's death. Ultimately, Bartelt was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. To this day, Bartelt continues to deny involvement in Jesse Blodgett's death, despite overwhelming evidence presented during the trial. The verdict provided closure for some, but left lingering questions about how such a tragedy could unfold unnoticed. Despite the conviction, unanswered questions remain. What warning signs, if any, were missed in the months leading up to Jesse's death? Could Daniel Bartelt's alleged descent into violent fantasies have been detected earlier? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, why did a trusted friend allegedly turn into a predator? These are the shadows that continue to loom over Hartford, long after the courtroom doors closed. Jesse Blodgett's tragic death sparked more than grief. It ignited a movement. Her family founded the Love is Greater Than Hate Project, dedicated to preventing violence and promoting compassion. Locally, conversations about safety, mental health, and awareness took root. Nationally, the case became a sobering reminder that danger does not always come from strangers. Communities across the country reflected on how to better protect those most vulnerable. Jesse's legacy, though born from tragedy, continues to inspire change. As we close the chapter on the tragic true story of Jesse Blodgett, we ask you this. Who was the first person to raise suspicion in Jesse's case, but was later cleared? Could a different turn of events have changed everything? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe for more true crime stories. As always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.